Hello Commanders, today I will talk about the top 5 heavy cruisers in Azur lane. One important thing to note, because Vanguard damage often pales in comparison to main fleet damage, I consider the survivability or utility that a Vanguard ship provides to be more important than their damage. And without further ado, number 5 is Prince Heinrich. Her base stats are very good with a high HP pool and decent evasion. She also has the highest firepower stat out of all heavy cruisers and a very high main gun efficiency at 160%. This along with her secondary ghost gun gives her very consistent gun damage despite not having a main gun +1. Unfortunately, her skills are nothing amazing. Her first skill provides some simple but useful self buffs, but her second skill is not great, providing a barrage and shield that are useful but very underwhelming. The barrage damage is lackluster and the shield does not deploy at the start of battle, hurting her uptime on it. Overall, she has great stats that give her good tankiness and damage, but falls short due to her below average skills. Number 4. San Francisco. Her stats are pretty average across the board, however she is a USS gunship, which means she gets main gun +1 and she can equip a secondary destroyer gun. This along with the barrage from her first skill helps her deal a good amount of damage as a Vanguard ship. What makes her 4th place though is how versatile her second skill is. She gets a different effect from it based on her position in the Vanguard. When placed in the front, she gets significantly tankier with a 5% evasion buff and a 15% reduced damage taken buff. In the rear, she gains a 15% firepower buff as well as giving a 5% damage buff to the rest of the Vanguard. Finally, placing her in the middle allows her to function as a healer, which is very useful for mobbing where you can trigger it multiple times through multiple battles. And if you've noticed, she also gains a decent amount of anti-air stat in all her skills, making her pretty good at shooting down enemy planes. All this makes San Francisco a very well-rounded ship capable of fulfilling any role in whatever fleet you put her in. In 3rd place is Drake. Now, I said at the beginning of the video that survivability and utility are more important for the Vanguard, but Drake is kind of an exception. She has great base stats with good HP and evasion, making her decently tanky. Her second skill helps too, giving her a heal and a 15% evasion boost, so it's not like she has bad survivability, but what Drake has over other heavy cruisers is just a lot of extra damage. High firepower stat, main gun +1, and a secondary ghost gun are just the beginning. Looking at her second skill again, the heal procs off a barrage, which deals good damage, and the evasion buff also comes with a very helpful 15% firepower and 21% reload buff. And then her first skill provides strong damage buffs to both her main gun and secondary gun that make her effective against all armor types. This makes Drake a great choice for the Vanguard if all you want is damage and a little more damage. Number 2 on the list is Rue Muse. She has great base stats, high HP, high firepower, high evasion, and a main gun +1. Her base stats already make her a great ship, but Rue Muse gets even better when you look at her skills. Her first skill is a barrage that applies a 10% damage taken debuff to any enemies hit, and a slow if only one enemy is hit, which is likely to apply if you are bossing with her. Vanguard ships that increase main fleet damage are very valuable, as most of your damage will likely come from the main fleet. The 15-second timer on Rue Muse's skill is a little hard for carriers to work with, but for battleships they have some great fast-firing gun options that can line up with it. Her second skill is actually a decent shield skill that protects her from shelling damage, and more importantly, it activates at the beginning of the battle, giving her much better uptime on it. And I guess it lets you ram her as well? Well, ram her into enemies. She is the one that does the ramming. And finally, number 1 is Anchorage. I'm sure you're used to hearing this by now, but like the rest of the ships on the list, she has great base stats, high HP, decent firepower, high evasion, as well as a main gun +1. But Anchorage's damage is actually not that great. She makes up for it by being virtually immortal, and this is all thanks to her second skill. Every time she fires her torpedoes, she gains a massive 40% evasion buff and a 6% HP shield. If the shield breaks, she gains another ridiculous 100% evasion. 100! Considering how important evasion is for heavy cruisers and Anchorage having a pretty high base evasion herself, this skill basically translates to every time she fires her torpedoes, she becomes immune to damage for a few seconds. It is because of this skill that Anchorage has somewhat of a weird build going on for her. Instead of using your strongest torpedoes, Anchorage cares more about using fast-firing torpedoes, needing her to use much weaker torpedoes than other ships. Also, her first skill has a barrage, which if it fails, shortens her torpedo reload timer by 3 seconds. And since the activation chance increases with level, people often choose to leave her first skill at level 1 because you actually want the barrage to fail so that you can shoot more torpedoes. And on top of all of this, she is a USS ship, which means she can equip the Elite Damage Control Auxiliary, giving her 8 seconds of anti-death as well. This makes her one of the hardest ships to take down in the game. You might be wondering why this video isn't over yet, and why there are no honorable mentions. Well, that's because honestly this whole list is kind of an honorable mention. And that's because the 4 UR large cruisers are all just stronger and tankier heavy cruisers. And I didn't want to make a list of top 5 heavy cruisers where 4 of the 5 ships are actually just large cruisers. But if you've leveled any of the 4 UR large cruisers, they can easily replace any heavy cruiser you might be using at the moment. The only reasons that you would pick a heavy cruiser over one of these 4 is because either they bring some unique utility, which is kind of what this list is about. You don't own any of the 4 UR large cruisers yet, which is common for newer players since 3 of them are locked behind research, or there's just a heavy cruiser that you really like.